Mark Reynolds tightened the last bolt on the cedar post and stood back, admiring his work. After a grueling weekend of digging holes, pouring concrete, and aligning planks in the searing sun, the new fence around his backyard stood proudly, 6 feet tall, perfectly straight, and just the privacy his family needed. It was more than wood and nails. It was the beginning of peace in their new home. That peace lasted all of 9 minutes. From across the quiet cul-de-sac, a figure emerged. She walked with purpose, heels clicking on the pavement despite the summer heat, clipboard in hand, sunglasses, perched like a judge's gavel on her face. Every neighbor knew that silhouette. Karen Whitmore, head of the HOA committee, judge, jury, and executioner of the neighborhood code enforcement. Mark had been warned about her, of course. Everyone on the block had a story. One guy got fined for hanging a towel over his porch railing to dry. Another received a certified letter for placing a basketball hoop too close to the sidewalk. Mark had laughed those off. Until now, Karen didn't knock. She waited. Mark opened the front door slowly, wiping sweat from his brow. "Afternoon. Your fence," she said, without preamble. "It's in violation." Mark blinked. "Sorry?" Page 14. Section C of the Community. Standards. She tapped the clipboard like it was gospel. All fences must be no closer than 3 feet to the HOA common access line. Yours is approximately 6 inches over. That's encroachment. I followed the layout from the builder. Mark said, trying to remain polite. There was a metal stake in the ground when we moved in. Same spot the previous owner had. She cut him off. Then they were in violation too. Karen handed him a printed notice. The font was bold. The language was aggressive. "This is your formal warning. You have 7 days to correct the encroachment, or face fines up to $250 per day. Failure to comply may result in legal action." Mark read it twice. "You didn't even measure." "I've done this a long time," she said coolly. "I can eyeball a line from 30 feet. He nearly laughed, but her expression never wavered. This wasn't a friendly heads up. It was a shot fired. She pivoted on her heel and strutted back across the street, where she lived in a pristine beige 2-story house with plastic flamingos that mysteriously never earned a violation. Mark stood on his porch, the notice still, warm from her hand, and felt his jaw tighten. He walked back to the fence, 6 inches, if that. The planks were aligned with the property stake and hadn't moved an inch from the original blueprint. He pulled out his phone and snapped a photo, then another of the stake, and one more of Karen's house across the street, just in case. Inside, his wife Sarah glanced at the notice and groaned. "She's starting already?" Mark nodded. "Apparently. I'm a menace to society. You going to move it?" "Not yet," he said quietly. He spent that evening looking up property records, printing out diagrams, and reviewing the HOA bylaws with a highlighter and a red pen. If Karen wanted a war over 6 inches of wood, she was going to get one. But he wasn't going to fight on her terms. Not yet. He was going to find out why she cared so much about that patch of dirt, and what she might be hiding on her side of the line. Because Mark had a gut feeling. This wasn't about the fence. This was personal. Mark wasn't surprised when the HOA notice arrived in the mail 2 days later. What did surprise him was how detailed and fast it came. Glossy paper, HOA letterhead, certified stamp, a $500 warning fine, preemptively drafted for non-compliance. It was less a reminder and more a declaration of war. Sarah held it up, at breakfast, like it was a death certificate. Did she camp out at the HOA printer overnight? "I think she owns the printer," Mark muttered. He wasn't entirely wrong. Karen didn't just enforce the rules. She wrote most of them. At least that's what the older neighbors said. Over the years, she'd nudged, edited, and manipulated the HOA bylaws so they served one consistent mission: total control. She didn't just care about neighborhood standards. She treated them like sacred law, and she wielded them like a weapon. Mark decided to walk the block that afternoon, just to cool off. What he found instead was a breadcrumb trail of fear. Old man, Don at the end of the street, leaned in when Mark mentioned Karen. She got me for planting sunflowers in my front yard, said they attracted bees, and made it a hazard for children. He gave a bitter laugh. That was my wife's favorite flower. Karen knew that. The next house over, Jake and Marcy, young couple with a toddler, were packing boxes. We're renting out, Jake said. We just can't take her anymore. Our baby slide was apparently too colorful. He didn't even try to smile. Story after story. Towel on a porch rail. Violation. Halloween decorations. Up before October 1st. Violation. Garage left open for more than 15 minutes. Violation. No one stood up to her. And now, Karen had chosen her next target. Mark didn't want to be a martyr, but he was starting to feel like this wasn't a random strike. It was a strategy, a slow squeeze, and it all started to feel calculated. That night, Mark dug deeper. He pulled up his house's original survey online. The metal stake in his yard wasn't a mistake. It was documented. The fence he'd built followed that boundary line exactly. But then he did something odd. He looked up Karen's property records. And that's when things got weird. Her recorded boundary lines were different from the ones she quoted in the violation. Slightly, but crucially. According to the city's official parcel map, her lot ended about 11 inches before her hedge line. She'd either made a mistake, or she wanted people to believe her yard was larger than it really was. Mark stared at the screen, heart rate rising. That little patch of land she claimed wasn't part of the HOA's common access line at all. It was technically a strip of property the original builder designated as a utility easement, neither hers nor under HOA control, which meant one thing: her entire basis for the violation was garbage. He closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. Something about this felt deeper than a simple grudge. She'd forced people out of homes before. What if Karen had a pattern? Claiming imaginary violations, pushing people to move, and then benefiting in some hidden way. Mark pulled out his phone and made a quiet video log, documenting the fence, the stake, the HOA notice, and the property records. He backed up every file to the cloud. If Karen was willing to weaponize the rules, he wasn't going to fight her with fists. He was going to bury her in proof. Still, he hadn't told her he knew yet. Let her think she was winning, because the next move would be his, and it wouldn't just be legal, it would be poetic. Mark sat in the dim glow of his garage workbench, staring at the printed property lines, like they were treasure maps. He'd highlighted his boundary in blue, and Karen's in red. The lines didn't lie. Her violation wasn't just wrong, it was entirely fabricated. And yet, she'd sounded so sure, so confident. Either she truly believed her lie, or she had been running this same con for so long that she assumed no one would question her. But Mark wasn't like her usual victims. He was stubborn, quiet, and, unlike most people, he didn't mind reading the fine print. That same night, he drove to the county recorder's office. The website only showed partial maps. He wanted originals. Surveys signed, stamped, and filed. He paid $15 for access and walked out with 3 copies. His property, Karen's, and the narrow sliver between them, that she'd claimed belonged to the HOA. It didn't. It belonged to no one. Technically still listed as utility space, created for drainage during construction, and left out of HOA jurisdiction entirely. The kicker: Karen had no authority over it, not even a little, which made her complaint not just petty, it made it illegal. Back home, Mark spread the maps out on the dining table. Sarah joined him, drying her hands with a dish towel. "You look like a detective." "I might be." He pointed to Karen's line. "See this?" "Mm-hmm." "She's claiming the fence is 6 inches into HOA property, right? But that's not HOA land. It's unzoned utility space. I checked. The HOA has no jurisdiction over it." And Karen's line actually stops before it. Technically, he paused, measuring with a ruler. "Her landscaping crosses into the unclaimed strip." Sarah raised her eyebrows. "So she's encroaching?" "Yep." "And she knows?" "Nope." "Not yet." Mark's mind raced. He could expose her. He could take it to the HOA board, or file a complaint with the county. But something held him back. That would be the obvious move, and obvious was what Karen expected. She wanted a paper fight. She wanted meetings and letters and technical jargon. That's how she won. She buried people in rules until they gave up. But what if Mark didn't play her game? What if he played his own? The next morning, Mark ordered a professional drone survey. Not just an overhead image, but a topographic scan with digital overlays, certified for legal use. He paid a premium for rush service. The operator, a no-nonsense guy named Devin, flew the drone for 20 minutes while Karen stood on her porch, arms crossed, watching. She didn't ask what was happening. That told Mark everything he needed to know. She knows something's off. Devin said afterward. "She didn't blink the whole time." "Good," Mark said. "Let her stew." That evening, the drone company emailed the digital report. It was perfect. The survey confirmed everything: the property lines, the original stake, and even the extent of Karen's illegal hedge line that spilled over into the unclaimed strip. Mark created a digital folder, FenceGate. He uploaded every photo, every document, every survey, and backed it up to multiple cloud services. If Karen wanted to take this public, he'd be ready to meet her in front of the whole board. But then, a different idea hit him. He stared at the map again. That little strip. It wasn't hers. It wasn't the HOA's. But based on the angle and measurements, there was just enough room to move the fence again. Only this time, he wouldn't move it back to his line. He'd move it onto hers, just an inch, maybe 2. Enough to be annoying, enough to be legal, enough to make a point. A slow grin crept across his face. She wanted a line battle. She was about to lose ground. Mark didn't say a word to Karen. Not a text, not a call, not a glance. Instead, that Saturday morning, under the watchful eye of half the street, he removed the fence. Post by post, panel by panel, slowly, meticulously. No grumbling, no scene. From her porch, Karen stood like a statue, clutching her coffee mug like a trophy. Her smug satisfaction was practically visible from across the cul-de-sac. She probably thought she'd won. Another neighbor folded under pressure. Another line, corrected. But Mark wasn't conceding. He was preparing. By nightfall, the fence was gone. His backyard lay exposed. Sarah watched through the kitchen window, worried. "She'll think she beat you." Mark just smiled. Good. Sunday was quiet. Too quiet. Karen didn't gloat, didn't even come outside. That alone made Mark suspicious. She had her win. So why the silence? He figured it out Monday morning. His email pinged at 6:07 a.m. It was, a forwarded complaint from the HOA's anonymous concern line. Attached were 2 photos, one of the fence removal in progress, the other of Mark's bare yard. The subject line read, "Unfinished yard work. Eyesore and security risk." Of course, he wasn't supposed to win by following the rules. Karen didn't want compliance. She wanted control. Even when he obeyed, she twisted it into another violation. But this time, Mark was already 10 moves ahead. At exactly 10:00 a.m., a delivery truck rolled up. Out came lumber, cement, more fencing, but not the same kind. This was darker, sleeker, more expensive looking, aesthetically modern, a complete contrast to the traditional white picket style preferred in the neighborhood. Then came the contractors. Licensed, insured, professional. They got to work immediately. Karen emerged at 10:06. She marched straight up to the site, clipboard in hand, phone already recording. "Excuse me," she barked. "Where's your construction permit?" The lead contractor didn't blink. "Right here," he said, handing over the printed permit. Stamped and cleared. She flipped through the pages. Her eyes narrowed. "You're building it. Over there." According to the legal survey filed with the city last week, the contractor replied, "It's well within Mr. Reynolds's boundaries." Karen looked again, closer. Her expression faltered. She realized it wasn't just a rebuild. The fence was going forward, past the previous line, pressing right up to her hedge, right to the inch. Mark stepped outside, arms folded, staying quiet. Karen turned toward him, confused, possibly alarmed. "This isn't your property line." "It is now," he said calmly. "I submitted a legal property adjustment request to the county. That strip you said belonged to the HOA. It's actually an easement. I filed to claim it." She blinked. He smiled. "The city approved it last Friday." A beat passed. She looked ready to explode, but she couldn't. Not in front of witnesses. Not when the paperwork was official. The contractors carried on. By mid-afternoon, the new fence stood firm. Bold. Unapologetic. Its modern panels cast long shadows onto Karen's pristine lawn. Her carefully manicured hedge. Partially boxed in. Now, from her front window, she'd no longer see the open street. But instead, 6 feet of wood, and a not-so-subtle reminder. Mark's property had just grown. He hadn't crossed the line. He moved it. Later that evening, Sarah stepped out with 2 beers. "You know she's going to retaliate." Mark nodded. "I'm counting on it, because the next step wasn't just defense. It was exposure. And he was ready to drag every skeleton Karen had out of her HOA filing cabinet. One by one, she declared war. But he built the wall. By Monday morning, the new fence wasn't just standing tall. It was making a statement. Neighbors walked by slower than usual, sneaking glances at the dark wood line that sliced through the end of Karen's property like a sword. Some nodded, in approval. Others smirked. But Karen, she was already plotting her counterattack. At exactly 8:12 a.m., Mark received a new violation notice via email. This time, it was absurd. Section 6 TAS A. Exterior Aesthetic Compatibility Violation. Your fence material and color scheme do not match the community aesthetic standard. Approved in 2007. Immediate repainting and material substitution is required. Mark didn't even flinch. He expected it. Karen had turned HOA codes into a weapon. And like a weapon, she was now firing blindly. Later that afternoon, a second email came. See to the HOA board. Possible permit forgery investigation request. Apparently, Karen was alleging that the county's approval of the fence expansion was suspiciously expedited. She wanted a full review of the permit process. Mark almost admired her persistence. Almost. That evening, Sarah found him sitting at the kitchen table again, laptop open, a half-dozen documents spread out beside him. "She's going nuts," she said. "She's desperate," Mark replied. "And when people get desperate, they make mistakes." He scrolled through the HOA's publicly accessible documents. For the past 3 nights, he'd been digging meeting minutes, annual budgets, board votes. Most of it was boring, until he found something odd. "Check this out," he said, turning the laptop towards Sarah. A line from the HOA's 2022 annual spending report read, "Landscaping reserve expense, shared maintenance area, $4,200. Karen, Whitmore residence." Sarah frowned. Why is her name next to a shared expense? Exactly. Mark zoomed in. It's the only one in the entire report with a person's name attached. That same year, the HOA raised fees by 8%, claimed it was landscaping costs. He kept digging. Found a photo from 2021 on the neighborhood Facebook page. Karen's front yard used to be modest. Shrubs, patchy grass, a tired old oak. Now, she had a professionally manicured front lawn, tiered flower beds, and a brand new stone walkway. All of it added within the last year. She used HOA money, Mark said, to upgrade her own property. That's fraud. Can you prove it? Sarah asked. Working on it. The next morning, Mark visited City Hall again. This time, not for property records, but for permits. He requested all residential landscaping permits filed under Karen's address in the last 2 years. There was only one, filed 18 months ago, but it listed the project as community walkway upgrade, not a private residence. He grinned. That was enough. He returned home, made a color-coded spreadsheet, labeled every suspicious expense, and began organizing a report. This wasn't just about a fence anymore. This was systemic. Karen had bullied families out, rigged violation reports, pushed people into compliance to hide what she was doing behind the scenes. But now, she had a paper trail. That night, he uploaded everything to a secure folder titled HOA Operation Transparency. Then, he did something Karen never expected. He shared the link anonymously with every member of the HOA board. The fuse had been lit. He didn't know exactly when it would blow, but Karen's kingdom was about to catch fire. Karen always liked to say the HOA was her baby. She practically raised it, shaped it, controlled it, and until now, no one had dared challenge her. But babies grow up, and sometimes they bite back. By Tuesday morning, the anonymous email with Mark's dossier had reached every HOA board member. It started as a whisper, an uncomfortable phone call here, a nervous email there, but by midday, it had turned into a low rumble of unrest. Mark stayed quiet. He didn't need to stir the pot. He just needed to let the truth rise. That afternoon, he noticed something curious. Tom Whitaker, the HOA's treasurer, usually a friendly face who stayed out of drama, walked past Mark's driveway and offered a subtle nod. No words, just a knowing glance. The kind of look that said, "I saw what you sent." Mark nodded back. Then came the email blast. Subject: Emergency HOA board meeting, Friday at 7 p.m. Location: Community Center. Open to all homeowners. No. Agenda listed. No explanation. Karen was about to be cornered in her own arena, but she wasn't going down quietly. By Wednesday morning, 3 new violation notices arrived in Mark's inbox. Fence exceeds allowable height by 2.5 inches. Unauthorized drone. Activity: violating HOA airspace privacy policies. Suspicious and possibly defamatory activity toward board members. She was flailing now, grasping for anything that could discredit or intimidate him. Then came the real punch. That afternoon, Mark found a letter taped to his front door, hand-delivered, from a lawyer. A cease and desist. Karen was accusing him of slander, data tampering, and public defamation of character. The language was aggressive, threatening. Sarah read it, jaw tight. She really thinks this will scare you. Mark folded the letter neatly and set it down. No, she's bluffing. You sure? She has to bluff, because if she takes me to court, everything goes public. He was right. Karen didn't want exposure. She wanted control. And now that she was losing it, she was doing what all tyrants do, using fear as a last weapon. But fear didn't work on Mark anymore. On Thursday, the neighborhood started talking, quietly at first, whispers at mailboxes, side conversations during dog walks. The documents had made the rounds. Mark overheard one neighbor murmur, "If that landscaping thing is true, she stole from all of us." Another said, "She fined me $100 for leaving a trash can out, and then used our dues to build a flower wall." For the first time, the fear was fading. And on Friday night, they came. More than 30 residents packed into the small community center. Normally half-empty for board meetings. Karen sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 other board members, her mouth tight and her eyes scanning every face like she was preparing for battle. Mark didn't sit. He stood at the back, arms crossed, watching. The room buzzed with unease. Tom, the treasurer, cleared his throat. "We've received some serious allegations of financial misconduct. Tonight's meeting is open forum. We'll begin with the anonymous evidence package that's been circulating." Karen jumped in. "It's slander. None of that is verified. This is an attempt to smear me." A hand raised in the audience. Then another. And another. Tom glanced at Karen. "We're going to let the homeowners speak." Karen's mouth tightened even further. Mark didn't step forward. He didn't have to. The neighborhood was finally finding its voice, and it was loud enough now to echo. Karen had ruled for too long with fear and fines, but the board wasn't blind anymore. And by the end of the night, a vote would change everything. The room was tense, thick with the quiet hum of restrained frustration, the kind that had been building in the neighborhood for years. And now, with the entire community seated shoulder to shoulder, Karen faced a crowd she could no longer control, with clipped emails and sternly worded notices. Tom cleared his throat again, holding up a tablet. "I've reviewed the documents, financial reports from the past 2 years, property surveys, screenshots of email exchanges, even contractor invoices. There are inconsistencies. Many of them." Karen stood abruptly. "These are fabricated," she said. "Anonymous sources aren't credible. This is clearly the work of someone with a personal vendetta." "Are you saying the county permits were fake too?" asked Mrs. Delaney from Lot 9. Her voice cracked, but rang clear across the room. Karen blinked. I'm saying someone could have accessed private documents and misrepresented them." A snort came from the left side of the room. Mr. Calder, a retired cop, folded his arms. "Or you just got caught." A few nervous chuckles rolled through the room. Karen's face tightened. "You think this is funny? I've kept this neighborhood beautiful, orderly, safe. If I've made a few executive decisions along the way, it's because no one else stepped up." Tom didn't flinch. "It's not about beauty. It's about transparency." Another board member, a younger guy named Jacob, spoke up. "And legality. We had no idea HOA funds were used to upgrade a private residence." Karen's voice cracked. "You all approved the landscaping budget." "Yes," Tom said, "but we didn't approve you hiring your cousin's company under a false vendor name." gasps. That hadn't been in Mark's original packet. But clearly, others had started digging too. Karen turned red. This is an ambush. A smear campaign. Tom sighed and set his tablet down. We have to take this seriously. As per our bylaws, we'll open the floor to a motion. From the middle row, Mrs. Jensen raised her hand. I move to suspend Karen Whitmore from her position as HOA president pending full investigation. I second it, said Jacob. The room fell into stunned silence. Then Tom said, all in favour. Hands went up, one after another. All around the room, even the quiet ones. Even Karen's supposed allies. Only one hand didn't rise. Karen's. When the count was done, Tom nodded solemnly. Majority rules. Effective immediately. Karen Whitmore is suspended. Karen's mouth moved, but no words came out. For the first time, she looked small. She gathered her clipboard, her phone, and her pride, then walked out the back door, head held high, eyes refusing to meet anyone's. But the cracks had shown, and behind her perfect smile was a woman undone. After the meeting, neighbours gathered in the parking lot. Some were still shocked, others quietly giddy. For the first time in years, people actually lingered, talking, connecting. The fear was gone. Mark stayed in the back, watching. He didn't need applause. He wasn't here to win points. He just wanted peace. Tom approached. You were the anonymous source, right? Mark gave a small shrug. I just shared what anyone could have found. Tom smirked. Well, I owe you a beer either way. As people drifted off into the night, Mark walked home beside Sarah, the cool air buzzing with the smell of distant BBQs and fresh June grass. I can't believe it, she said. You actually beat her. Mark smiled. Not yet, he replied. Why not? Because she's not done. He looked back toward Karen's house. Still lit, still brooding. She doesn't lose quietly. The days following Karen's suspension felt different. Quiet. The neighborhood, once ruled by stiff HOA newsletters and icy stares, was suddenly friendly. Mark started getting casual waves from neighbors he barely knew. Mr. Calder even dropped off a six-pack and said, about time someone put her in her place. But Mark wasn't relaxing just yet. Karen hadn't been seen since the meeting. Her curtains stayed drawn. Her porch light, once perpetually on, like a lighthouse of judgment, remained off. It was eerie until the letter came. Friday morning. Mark opened his mailbox, and there it was. Certified mail from Karen Whitmore's attorney. Sarah stood behind him as he opened it. Let me guess, another cease and desist? Not quite. Karen was suing him. According to the notice, she was filing a civil claim for emotional distress, property value damage, and malicious property interference. She claimed Mark's vindictive fence expansion had reduced her home's curb appeal and caused irreparable psychological trauma. She's insane, Sarah whispered. Mark scanned the documents. She'd also attached a glossy full-color photo of her hedge, boxed in slightly by his new fence. As Exhibit A, hostile landscaping. It would have been funny if it wasn't so ridiculous. But Mark didn't laugh. He acted. Monday morning, he was back at City Hall, meeting with his contact in the permitting department. Then the next day, he visited the zoning office. And then, the courthouse. He filed a countersuit, but not for defamation, for fraud, HOA fund embezzlement, and abuse of authority. He attached every piece of evidence, now vetted and officially infiled, and submitted it with a signed complaint backed by a growing list of co-signing neighbors. Then he took one last step. He invited a local real estate lawyer named Jenna Riggs. known for loving HOA takedown cases, to a neighborhood potluck. She came, and she brought pamphlets. By Friday, Mark posted a sign near the mailbox. Community meeting, HOA restructuring vote. This Sunday, or 6 p.m., this time Karen showed up. Hair perfectly done, lips tight, clipboard in hand, but she didn't look strong. She looked tired. As the meeting began, Tom stepped aside. Mark stood at the front this time. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat. He just told the story of neighbors fined into silence, of aesthetic violations used as weapons, of funds siphoned for private gain, of a system run by fear, and the fence that finally drew the line. And then he handed the floor to Jenna. With ease, she explained how the HOA bylaws allowed for a full recall vote, how a new election could reset everything, and how homeowners had every right to demand accountability. The vote passed unanimously. Karen didn't speak. She left before the closing remarks, slipping out the side door like a ghost. 2 months later, a new board was elected. Karen's house went up for sale shortly after, quietly, discreetly, as if she wanted to disappear without anyone noticing. Mark's fence still stood, untouched, unmoved, a quiet symbol of standing your ground when it matters most. On the day the for sale sign came down and the moving truck pulled away, Sarah leaned on the porch rail and asked, "You think we've seen the last of her?" Mark watched as the last box disappeared into the truck. "Maybe," he said, "but if not, I've still got extra fence panels." They both laughed, and for the first time since they moved in, the neighborhood felt like home. Not a battlefield, just home.